Talk about speakers. Of course, we are coming into the audio element of creating your home cinema system. Speakers come in many forms. The most basic and probably most common speaker type is your average cabinet speaker. So that's like bookshelf speakers, floor standing speakers, or speakers that are physically just mounted to the wall, surface mount speakers essentially. Then of course you get concept speakers. Now these speakers are the type of things that make you look at them and think, what the hell is going on here and what does that thing do? For instance, if you were to do a quick Google search of Lawrence Dickey and see what speakers he has designed, you might be amazed to think that those shapes are actually speakers and not something else. I won't say any more, and normally concept speakers are not meant for home cinema systems, but I figured it's worth mentioning because I have seen them used in cinema systems. Then of course you get the speakers that disappear into the void, be that in ceiling, in wall, or completely invisible. What do I mean by invisible? So those invisible speakers are completely plastered into either a wall or a ceiling. While these are a nice party piece, it's not the kind of speaker you want to use in a home cinema system because normally the quality just doesn't stack up to a regular speaker that's freestanding in the air or mounted to a wall or something. However, in-ceiling and in-wall speakers are very common in home cinema systems, especially once you start looking at Atmos systems where you do require overhead channels. And rooms that have fabric walls, for instance, normally make use of in-wall speakers behind the fabric walls. Then of course there are baffle wall behemoths, I've called them. Those are not actual speaker types. These are essentially entry-level commercial grade speakers, and they do require a baffle wall to house them. Now a baffle wall is something we'll get into when it comes to the more advanced design principles, so to speak, of home cinemas. And normally these speakers are only available through professional installers, unless you know a guy, of course. Then there are just straight up commercial grade speakers. These things range in size from 3 feet tall up to 12 feet tall. They are massive, or at least can be. The good thing about commercial grade speakers is that they will just carry on working forever and they will sound great forever. But they are expensive and normally you can't easily get hold of them unless you find some second hand through like Facebook Marketplace or eBay, or unless you know a guy. And then of course there are specialist installation speakers. Now these are ones that tuck away into corners, be it just a two-sided corner, so one that sits in the corner like that, or even a three-sided corner, as in corners of a room. And bipole speakers, which are used for extending audio channels along the length of the room. The many shapes and sizes of speakers aside, of course there are active and passive speakers. Now normally home cinema systems use passive speakers because they are driven by amplification systems or AV receivers. Now it's worth noting that on occasion you might have to use active speakers, or you might even design a system that entirely relies on active speakers. Like in an earlier video I mentioned live audio that use completely wireless speakers for creating surround sound systems. Now those can be built using completely active speakers for all channels. So really, if you need to use an active speaker, it will largely depend on your design of your system and the requirements. In some cases it can be used as a workaround for a system limitation, i.e. if you have an AV receiver that say has 7 channel processing but only 5 amplified channels, then you can either send the 2 additional channels to an amplifier and to 2 more speakers, or you can send them to active speakers. And of course some active speakers have the capability to daisy chain additional speakers on that channel. So if you had a really long room, you can expand, say, surround channels using additional speakers and just linking them to the previous speakers. That's something very technical and probably something you'll never come across, but These are just a few things that I figured is worth mentioning, just so that if you come across such a problem, you know there is a solution for it. So that leads us on to design lesson number 1 for you, and that's the beginnings of creating your audio scape. Let's call it that. So first of all, you have to decide on the number of surround channels. Generally for surround sound, the minimum you can have is 4 channels. So that's your front left and right, back left and right, or surround left and right. From there on up it goes 5, 7, 9, etc, etc. You get the idea. You just keep adding 2 to that, and you can basically design as many audio channels as you want into a surround system. Within limitation, some processors will not cope with more than say 7, 9, maybe 11. Some go up to 13 or 15 channel processing, so there is that to bear in mind. Plus, once you go beyond 13 channel processing, you're really starting to struggle for how many speakers you can fit into a room, unless of course the room is physically large enough to house them all. But that's a by the by. Then of course you decide on your installation type or types, i.e. are you going to have floor standing speakers all around, are you going to have wall mounted, in ceiling all around, on wall, bookshelf speakers. Decide on how you want the speakers to be physically mounted and stick with it. Of course, if you're doing a retrofit, note any physical limitations like ceiling depths, for instance, if you're having in-ceiling speakers, wall depths if you're having in-wall speakers, physical space if you're having floor standing speakers, etc. You get the idea. Of course, set yourself a budget, because no one has unlimited money for these kinds of things. And of course, if you did have unlimited budget for this kind of thing, you won't be doing a DIY system unless you really are passionate for the craft. Once you have those points down, it's time to begin searching and researching. So that is searching for what's available, researching what fits you best, and basically rinse and repeat that point until you lock in on the brand, shape, size, colour, power, etc. of speaker or speakers that you require for your home cinema. Of course, any questions on the design lessons here or anything in this video, head over to the discussions, drop a question, and I'll either answer where I can, or if we have another pro in the room, they'll be sure to answer as well. Until next time.